Hello everyone. Today we are going to see what BICEP is. It's a new language Microsoft released to deploy your infrastructure either in as a IaaS, either PaaS or SaaS. Doesn't matter. It's a new language. Today we are going to understand why when there was ARM template, why there was a need to write a new language, and how does it help developers or your DevOps team to deploy your resources in Azure. What are the comparison with ARM and what problems we had with ARM's template. We are also going to see demo of Bicep, a simple Bicep deployment as well as deployment using modules in Biceps. So let's jump into next slide. So what was the problems with ARM template? So ARM templates were not easier to deploy. As you might have seen if you worked with ARM templates, it were not easier to deploy. It had complicated expressions for even if you are writing a parameter, then using that parameter was really complex. If you had some dependency of your resources, like you are creating virtual machine, for your virtual machine you need to deploy, you need to create a nice NIC, you need to create a virtual network, you need to create public IP, so and you need to create NSG. So to create that whole hierarchy you had to do a lot of things, and when you were ready to deploy your template you used to get some weird errors, right? Sometimes you face those validation errors. So it was really complicated. We will see the comparison of that. Also, there were only two, used to be two files. So there was parameter file, there was deploy file. In deploy file you define your variables or parameter, or you define your resources, all resources into one file. But in Bicep you can do modules, right? You like in any programming language you can create different modules, right? So for different needs, we will see example of that. Again, as I said, it was really complex to write because of JSON, right? You write whole JSON. It's a declarative language. It had particular structure, so it was really complex, and then it was not easier to deploy as well. So you had to first validate and then deploy. There was lot of those issues as well. So let's see what are the benefits of Bicep. So Bicep is it support all resource type and API version. Bicep immediately supports our preview and GA version on Azure services. As soon as resource provider introduces a new resource type and API version, you can use Bicep files to deploy your resources. So by this that is the meaning. So if there is a API, resource manager API for your service on Azure, you can use Bicep to deploy your resources. It's a new language, so it make use of type scripting. So you will feel like you are writing either .NET or JavaScript. If you are a developer, you will find it really easier to correlate with the syntax of Bicep. So it's easier for if you are a DevOps developer and you are writing your infrastructure as a code, you can use VS Code to write your Bicep file. You can do in ARM templates as well, but it's a lot more easier while you are doing these Bicep templates. It take less time to deploy than then I already said there is a modularity. You can break your code like in .NET. You break your code into namespaces. You have different classes, and so that is that where if you are C# developer, you can uh, understand this, like how you can create different modules, right? In different, you can have module for, if you take an example, you can have module for app service, you can have module for deploying your storage, you can have module for deploying your databases, you can have module for deploying your monitoring resources like uh, Azure and Insights or something, right? So you can, you and by doing that you can, like in .NET code, you can organize your solution, right, using classes and modules. Same way you will be able to do that. You can create different small modules files and reference those modules into your main file. Like that you can do into Bicep, which was not possible in the ARM templates. So Bicep is integrated with Azure services such as Azure Policy, template specs, and Bluetooth blueprints. I think Microsoft is still releasing those on these services, but you can use them like you used to use ARM template with Azure Policy and blueprints. You can use them uh, with 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 Azure. Most of the Azure services you see here. Like if you know a little bit about Terraform manages the state in your system from where you're deploying. So if there is a change into your template, it keeps that track. But here it no state or state files to manage in Bicep. All state is stored on Azure. So suppose you have some change in same resource group, suppose you are deploying something into same resource group, it will maintain that state and will deploy only the change you are asking it to deploy. Okay, so that is great benefit. And as well as I want to mention, it is not replacement of Terraform. If you are still using Terraform, you can continue using Terraform, but why Microsoft brought it is to, if somebody is using ARM templates in for their production deployment of Azure resources, they wanted to resolve the issues we have seen in previous slide. So, and like to make it easier to deploy, easier to write, and make it easier to write code, easier for developer, easier for DevOps guys. So they wanted to solve that problem for the customers, right? So, and last point is it is completely no cost and it's an open source tool. It's completely free. You don't have to pay for any premium capabilities. It's also supported by Microsoft support. Okay, so let's see the architecture. Under the hood, it is ARM templates only. What I will say, what is there is Azure Biceps. You have Azure Bicep. You write the template, then Bicep build and Bicep compile Bicep file will convert it under the ARM under the hood. It will convert it them to ARM templates. We are going to see that when we deploy our Bicep templates. So you don't have to take care of writing ARM templates. You just focus on Azure Bicep files, template files, and Microsoft Azure CLI will take care of that, converting those templates to Azure ARM templates, Azure Resource Management Manager template. So it will convert it to JSON template file, and it will use PowerShell uh, for resource group deployment. If you're using PowerShell, you can use Azure CLI also, where you have AG group deployment create. So you can use it. Will once you pass that command, it will go to Azure Resource Manager, and on your behalf Azure Resource Manager will create the resources, whether it is a storage, IaaS, PaaS, or data, whatever service you are deploying it to. So that is basically Microsoft just created a using TypeScript linter. They created a new language which support TypeScripting, and it will tell you on runtime that there is some problem into your files, into your template, and that is really beneficial, right? How we see in .NET, if there is some issue, you will get the intelligence. So and you will know, suppose I'm writing some, I'm missing some parameter on the runtime, you will see that you are missing those parameters, so you should correct that, which was not possible into ARM templates. You know that only when you are going to deploy them, you are verifying them using deployment verify command in Azure CLI. So there are a lot of benefits. So let's see that comparison between these two, comparison of syntax. So here you see how you used to define variables in JSON in ARM templates. Variables here is like variables, colons, curly braces, demo var, example value. But in here it is like .NET or JavaScript language. So here you just define where and the value, right? Parameters also, you see how complex it was to write. You cannot remember that, right? So you might have to copy from somewhere and then define your parameters, or you have to, but here you can relate, it is param demo, and then you define your type equal to, if it is a string, if it is equal to, if your parameter type is array, you need to define array or array of a string. So logical operators also it supports. You can see in JSON how complex it was, like, and you had to open the this braces, and then and parameters is Monday, parameter is November. But here you can write like you are doing in JavaScript language, or conditionally you can set the value, right? You used to do in C sharp also, .NET, in JavaScript also you can do this. If is Monday is true, value is true, else false. So resources also, it was complex little bit. You need to define type, API version, and so on. Here it is really small. Syntax you need to type. We are going to see that. Deployment scopes again, you used to do like that, where you are going to deploy. But here targeted scope is subscription. You can define management group. It can be subscription management group, resource groups. So there are different scope you can define. Let's see more comparisons. So here we see you can conditionally define if else condition, which was really complex here in JSON. Here it is just if condition you need to use. And if you wanted to show output, you suppose you are creating a Azure virtual network gateway, and you need to know the IP after you deploy your template. You can return output, so you can see and you can test your Azure. You can test your functionality. Uh, Here you just have to write this public ip.properties.dns.fqdn. It will give you that output. So it's really simple for developers to write bicep template syntax. So let us see the demo of deployment, how we can deploy our bicep templates in Azure. So let me jump into my CLI, Azure CLI. So I'm here in Visual Studio. Here you can find extension BICEP. Once you install it, you need to trust it.
It will install since it is doing it, let me go to my PowerShell and prepare my environment. AG bicep install.